What's up, motivators? Taren here. If over the last few years you've maybe been confused by seeing professional endurance athletes out there smashing 20, 30 hours, huge 100+ mile run training weeks, and then at the same time hearing people like me and exercise physiologists saying that not all training is necessarily always healthy and that it needs to be balanced, this tends to confuse a lot of people. So today I'm going to go through 3 charts that I'm going to fill in that explain how health and performance can be brought together in one and where the risks are when you start not thinking about them as the same thing. Let's get into it.
My name is Taren Gazelle. In my late 20s, I was overweight, unfulfilled, and couldn't even run to the end of the block. Over the following 10 years, I lost 65 pounds racing triathlons, running races, cycling events, and world championships. But eventually, the suffer culture of endurance sports training caught up to me, causing health issues and injuries. Now, my company Motive and I are on a mission to help people live more fulfilling lives by reaching endurance sports goals using healthy methods. We can all kill it on race day without killing our bodies. Let's do it.
So all right, motivators, let's talk about this first chart here. What we've got on the bottom is training hours. At the top on this axis, we've got performance, and where higher is greater levels of performance. And on this side, we have levels of health, where higher is greater levels of health. What typically happens with training hours is that as you increase your training hours, your performance goes up. And this is just kind of thought to be the norm. What happens is as you get into greater and greater training loads, the improvement ends up leveling off. The amount of training hours that you need to get greater and greater levels of performance slows down, and eventually it ends up tapering off, where you actually train more and you can get slower, because this is where you're getting into not just overtraining, but overreaching. You're doing more than your body can actually handle. So that's your performance with the green line. The blue line here is health. And what happens with health is thought that training hours would just go up, that the more training you did, that the healthier you would be. But actually what's the case is as you increase training hours really quickly, the health improves, and then fairly quickly, it actually declines. So you are definitely better off doing exercise than no exercise, but there is a health decline, and that's where I'm talking about balancing health and training. So the big question related to this then that you'd be wondering is, well, at what point does health start declining, and at what point does performance start declining? In a lot of cases, it's much earlier than you think. Let's go show you. So just really quickly to share where these lines are of diminishing returns, we can go to a couple of studies. This first one is actually one where I did a podcast with one of the lead researchers, Dr. Raffaella Sinisgali. I'll put a link in the description below to this podcast that I did with her. It's called The Impact of Training Volume and Experience on Amateur Triathlon Performance. If we go all the way down, I will give you the spoiler alert of what they concluded. It's basically that they looked at 3 different versions of athletes preparing for Ironman Brazil. The versions were those who trained under 14 hours a week, those who trained 14 to 20 hours a week, and those who trained over 20 hours a week. The ones that went the fastest, the ones that actually trained less than 14 hours a week. So the amount that we need to train is far, far less than you think. It's not mandatory that you have to train 50, 20, 25-hour weeks to do well. I think that there are some weeks when you're talking about ultra trail runs or Grand Fondos or ultra cycling events or Ironmans where you do need some big weeks, because you have to get across the finish line and be able to do the distance, but it's not that you have to do over and over and over and over these big, massive training weeks that on average go up over 15, 20 hours a week as the average person. We're gonna get into why pros do this in a bit. On the health side of things, this is a study called Training for Longevity, the reverse J-curve of exercise. The O'Keeffes here are researchers that have been researching this sweet spot a lot of At what point does health start to get impaired when you start training a lot? This is just one study, but there have been a number of studies that showed this exact thing, that when you get closer and closer to an elite level athlete doing 10 hours a week or more consistently, you actually have more heart problems, which is the leading cause of mortality. It's like the biggest thing that if we can reduce our risk of having heart issues, that's gonna have the biggest effect on our lifespan and our health span, making sure that we live a long time and the time that we live is really well lived. What they found in that reverse J curve and this related study done by the O'Keeffes called the Goldilocks zone is visually we can see it a little bit better here, that we can see that a strenuous jogger and a sedentary jogger basically had the same all-cause mortality, and that a sedentary jogger actually had better health outcomes than a strenuous jogger when you adjusted for age, sex, smoking. So yes, exercise is excellent. We can see that exercise here of light joggers and moderate joggers, people that don't take it smashingly serious all the time, they are having improved health outcomes. Let's stay in that improved health outcome zone, and we'll show you how to do that right now. So just coming back to the board here, where we want to spend a lot of our time is under that, let's say it's 10 hours of training. We want to be under that 10 hours of training to make sure that we're still in that point where the healthy effects of training are giving us good effects as opposed to bad effects, and we're losing all of those possible health improvements that we're getting from the exercise. We also want to stop before the point where training just becomes a grind. As amateur endurance athletes, if we've got up to this point right here, before the point at which it's really just tapering off, and instead of having to do 14 hours a week of training for an Ironman, we have to do 22, 25, 30 hours a week just to get tiny marginal improvements, staying well back of that is going to be the best point for us. The thing to think about here is that from a health standpoint, 9 to 10 hours seems to be the cutoff with healthy training. And then from a training performance benefit, you really just have to go by the adage of more is more until it's not. And the until it's not is where you have to start thinking a lot about what you're sensing. Are you losing motivation to get out and do the second session of the day? Are your muscles sore? Are you feeling cranky? Are you having a hard time sleeping while still being exhausted throughout the day? These are indications that you're getting really close to, if not already past the until it's not. So keep an eye on that 10 hours of training and under, and then keep an eye on those indications that your body is giving you to tell you that you're at the until it's not stage. So the big question is, why are there so many pros out there? Basically, it's the norm to have 20 hours a week of training or more if you want to be a high level athlete. Why are they all training so much? Well, there's two reasons, and for that, we're going to use this second chart. Give me a second. This line that I drew here is just what's called a bell curve. This is a typical distribution of if you take a huge amount of people doing something, what are they going to be able to experience? What is going to be their way that their body handles a certain thing? And in this case, we're gonna say tolerable training volume. So at this level, we might say it's 40 hours. At this level, we might say it's 3 hours. Most people are going to fall in this general range here, where the vast majority of us are going to be more in that, like, let's say it's 12 to 7 hours. I'm just kind of making this up, but generally this is where people are going to fall. The pros that we see doing those 20, 30, 40-hour weeks are just naturally people who went through a 10-hour week and could handle it, and then a 15-hour week and then could handle it, and then a 20-hour week and then could handle it. And gradually they layered on more and more. That's the concept of progressive overload, where you just gradually do more and more, seeing what your body can handle. And a lot of the pros, just by nature, are in this anomaly. They are the rare ones. They are also people who have a lot of time throughout the day just to spend time recovering. So by nature, what we're going to see with a lot of professional athletes are athletes that just by default have done bigger training weeks and are able to handle it. That doesn't mean that everyone is doing these big training weeks and everyone should do these big training weeks. What is happening is because the professionals are constantly going for that marginally faster and faster time, like minutes make a big difference, they have to put in bigger and bigger training volumes to get that marginal improvement. Also remember that in the case of pros, they aren't necessarily concerned with their health. They are willing to sacrifice their health for improved performance because their entire life is dictated by better performance. How much they make, their entire identity, how well they do in their entire life's mission is completely determined by how well they perform. So health is not really the primary concern for them as it is with most amateur triathletes. They are trying to push more and more and more, and yeah, training volumes are going to result in more is more until it's not, and they're seeing how far they can push, how deep into this anomaly they can go to see how much more and more they can push. So the next question is, well then, how do you, the average person who is trying to be an endurance athlete while trying to use endurance sports for improved health and lifespan and improved quality of life, how do you deal with this where the entire culture is about, well, getting as far into the high training volumes as possible? Well, first, it's to understand that the point at which you're going to achieve diminishing returns is probably much sooner than a lot of people are experiencing. Another thing to know is that the point at which you are going to suffer negative health consequences, again, much earlier. But how do we balance that with actually being able to achieve your endurance goals? Because I don't think it's reasonable to have a good experience in an Ironman, or depending on the person, in a lot of cases even a half Ironman, with only training 9 to 10 hours a week. That's where we've got the last chart that I'm going to lay out here. So here's what we do in our Motive training app. There's a link in the description below. All of this training and these training methods are automated for you. All you have to do is put in your race dates and how much you want to train, the days that you want to train, and you just have to show up every single morning and do the hard work of actually showing up and getting prepared for the race. But all of the training is done for you. What we recommend is, let's say this is a sample season. The blue line is what we call baseline training. Year round, we like this to be in the 5 to 9 hour range, depending on what your goals are and what your time commitment and availability is. In that nice, healthy range where you're able to still stay very healthy, still stay very sharp and perform really well in races, and then have a nice drop down for an off season at the end. And then as races come up, then we pop up and prepare for those races. So if you've got a half Ironman for 3 months, we're popping up. If we've got an Ironman, well, that's 6 months. That's gonna be longer, but we pop up to a 14, 15 hour training week so that we can make sure that you're preparing for those races with the 6 hour bike rides and the 2.5 hour runs. And all together, you're going to make sure that you are achieving those goals. But what's been happening in endurance sports is, instead of popping up for that Ironman, it's just been bring everything up, and year round, it's going to be an average of 15 to 20 or 25 hours, and that's been the expectation and the culture. What we want to do is make sure that we're balancing health while getting people good performance, and the studies and the science are proving that you can do that with far less training that is accessible to more people, so that more people can go, hey, you know what? I can do that 6 to 9 hours throughout a year, and then, hey, for a few months, I build up to this big goal. I got it. So with all of that said, I hope that this clears some things up for you. If you found this helpful, hit the like button below. And if you want these training methods automated for you, hit the link in the description below to go check out our app. You can try it for free for 14 days. Later, motivators.